Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to Emory Climate Talks. My name is Eri Saikawa, and I'm an associate professor of environmental sciences and the director of science, policy, and community engaged research at the Resilience and Sustainability Collaboratory at Emory University. The new Nationally Determined Contributions Synthesis Report came out recently, and it is very clear that we are not reducing greenhouse gas emissions as needed. On the other hand, China and the US are starting to tackle the hydrofluorocarbon HFC emissions for climate change. The agriculture conservation proposal that is very much linked to today's topic is starting to emerge as well. And the existing proposal would pay farmers $25 per acre to plant cover crops, which are planted together with cash crops to reduce soil erosion and increase carbon. I believe agriculture will be a very hot topic on the upcoming UN climate change negotiations at COP26 as well. Emory Climate Talks is made possible by our anonymous donor that supports our trip to the United Nations climate change negotiations. And Emory Climate Talks is in partnership with the Department of Environmental Sciences and the Resilience and Sustainability Collaboratory at Emory University. I would like to thank Leah Thomas for doing all the work behind the scenes for this website, climatetalks.emory.edu, and for Emory Climate Talks programming in general. Before we go into today's program, I wanted to talk about some logistics and to encourage you to participate. We intentionally use the Zoom meeting platform rather than the webinar platform to make this Zoom webinars more inclusive and easier to participate. So please feel free to use the chat function to address any questions you may have, or if you have any information that you would like to share with anybody in this forum together. But we will have the time for Q&A at the end after the presentation. And I highly encourage you anybody who is interested in speaking up to raise your hands using the raise hand button and unmute yourselves when it is your turn. So as most of you are aware, most of the past talks are on the YouTube channel, and you can subscribe at youtube.com/c/Emory Climate Talks. Today's talk is recorded as well and will go online in a couple of days. I am so excited that we have Mr. Will Harris today, who is the 4th generation cattleman at White Oak Pastures. Mr. Harris graduated from the University of Georgia's School of Agriculture and was trained in the industrial farming methods. Mr. Harris initially used this industrial farming method with his father, but in 1995, he made a big decision to go away from it. And Mr. Harris has been recognized as a leader in humane animal husbandry and environmental sustainability. He was the president of the board of directors of Georgia Organics and is the beef director of the American Grass-Fed Association. Mr. Harris was elected 2011 Business Person of the Year for Georgia by the Small Business Administration. Since I started doing research on how agricultural practices affect soil greenhouse gas emissions, I have always been very fascinated by Mr. Harris' work. Today, I cannot be happier that we have him right with us today, so that he can tell us his stories and his passion related to resiliency in agriculture. I look forward to hearing about the work you do, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Mr. Harris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here with y'all today. I'll start out by, I'm much more comfortable with Q&A than I am presentations. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the farm and kind of how we got here, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, and if there's question and answer, that'll be great. If it's not, then I'll bore you with some more mundane facts about White Oak Pastures. So hopefully we'll get some questions. Today, the farm is a family farm. I am the 4th generation to manage it. Currently, two of my daughters and their spouses are helping manage the farm. And between the two of them, they've got 3 grandbabies that are here. So 6 generations of my family have been on this farm. And I guess the thing that I enjoy most about the farm story is how in the 155 years and 6 generations it's come full cycle. Most of what we know about the way my great-grandfather and grandfather ran the farm is anecdotal. Historically, we know how people farmed in the rural South in the late 1800s, early 1900s. My father but it would have been very highly focused on the care of the land and the animals and the local economy, because that was the wealth, that was all the wealth that they had. My father took over the farm post World War II, and that was where we really made huge sweeping changes, and that's what we're going to start out talking about today. And I went to the University of Georgia, graduated in 1976. I came home and farmed the farm very industrially, as my father had, and we were financially successful in operating in that system. But by the mid-90s, I was increasingly dissatisfied with that model. I started moving towards the current model that is White Oak Pastures, and we've been moving that way ever since. Today, the farm is 3,200 acres here on this home farm. It stretches over about 4 miles of US Highway 27. It's about a mile wide. It kind of does that. The farm is divided in, the 3,200 acres is divided into 120 something, 30-ish acre paddocks. And key to our farm is steady movement of animals. Our model is based on animal agriculture in allowing them to express their instinctive behavior, which involves a lot of movement. Today we raise 5 red meat species: cows, hogs, sheep, goats, rabbits. And we hand butcher them in a USDA inspected processing plant that we built here on the farm. We pasture raise 5 poultry species: chickens, turkeys, geese, guineas, ducks. We hand butcher them in a separate USDA inspected facility we built here on the farm. We raise certified organic vegetables, pastured eggs, honey, a little bit of fruit and nuts. And other, I used to think of the farm as a factory farm. We now think of it as an organism. With all these species of plants and animals and microbes are working symbiotic relationships to generate this abundance that we monetize to keep the farm operating another year. To take you back through the genesis, I think that we, my father's generation and my generation, really started going down the wrong road in agriculture post World War II. I've studied it a lot, and I don't think that we had the evolution of agriculture had been very damaging to the animals, to the environment, to the rural economies, and to World War II. But that was a real game changer. Post-World War II, Europe was starving, had an insatiable appetite for food, cheaper food, more food, and the war effort had given man, for the first time, the technologies to really break the cycles of nature. We'll talk more about that, and produce really, I'm going to call it, obscenely cheap and wastefully abundant food. So it was wildly successful. The changes in agriculture post-World War II did what my father's generation wanted done, but it came at a great cost to the welfare of the animals, the degradation of the environment, and the impoverishment of rural America. And what's kind of surprising looking back is those unintended consequences went really unnoticed for about 75 years. And we're just now, as a society, really facing up to and acknowledging the damage that was done in making food so cheap and so abundant. I'm not bragging when I say that we figured this out here at White Oak Pastures. We figured that out before most people did. And the reason it's not bragging is the reason we figured it out is not to our credit. We were so industrial, commodity centralized, so heavy-handed with tillage and chemical fertilizer and pesticides and antibiotics and hormone implants and those other tools that the negative unintended consequences became obvious to us more than they did our neighbors who were more moderate. That's not a very flattering thing to acknowledge about yourself, but that's the way it was. If you drink one shot of whiskey every night, you probably won't be an alcoholic. If you drink a quart of whiskey every night, you probably will learn what's bad about alcohol. And that's kind of what made us figure out that the problems exist. The good news is it caused me to step away from that system and really start trying to operate in a manner that was more working with nature than working against nature. And what I came to believe and continue to believe is that the damage came from breaking the cycles of nature. And I preach about that a lot. And the cycles of nature, I don't think we can even recognize them all. But to name a few, it's the carbon cycle, the mineral cycle, the water cycle, the energy cycle, the microbial cycle, the grazing cycle, the economic community benefit cycle, on and on and on. And when we became powerful enough using technology to break those cycles, we did. And we went from cooperating with nature to produce this abundance to to turning farms into factories and looking for problems to correct by killing something. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with this, but reductionist science and the technology that comes from it is incredibly powerful in a good way on complicated systems. This computer is a complicated system. It's not really effective on complex systems. Your body or Emory University or the United States government is a complex system. In a complicated system and a complex system, there's a lot going on to make it work. In a complicated system like this computer, if one component ceases to operate, it doesn't work anymore. So having a control in linear reductionist science is highly efficacious. On a complex system, there's a lot of things going on to make it work. But if one function changes or ceases to work, the system will morph and it will continue to operate. And in those systems, reductionist science and technology can give us a lot of unintended consequences. And that's what happened with my father's generation and mine with farming. We took those tools, I'll name them again, chemical fertilizer, tillage, pesticides, antibiotics, hormone implants, ionophores, others, and applied them to a super complex system, White Oak Pastures, and the unintended consequences were incredible. As compared to today, I told you what we do today, this farm became a monoculture of only cattle. And the damage we did to the soil was horrible, to the water, to the imprisonment of the animals, and the local economy failed. The local economy became financially irrelevant, economically irrelevant. all over America, small towns dried up, became ghost towns because economically they weren't needed anymore. When I was at my industrial peak in the early 90s, late 80s, I only had 4 employees. I was producing about $2 million worth of live cattle a year. And we weren't doing the economy any good. You know, they were minimum wage employees. Fast forward today, we've got 180 employees. They make significantly above the county average. I'm not proud of what they make. It's not that much, but it's significantly above the county average. Our payroll is over $100,000 a week in Clay County, Georgia. If you look it up in Wikipedia, you'll see that Clay County, Georgia is the poorest county in the United States of America based on household income. It's not the poorest based on per capita income. I don't know how that calculation is done, but rest assured, it's a very poor county. It would be a lot poorer if we had not changed how we operate. You know, we provide food, about $25 million worth of food a year and our food's not for everybody. Our food, our client base is, it's often considered to be elite, but that's just not true. It's not, our customer base is not super wealthy people necessarily. There may be some, but that's not the defining characteristic. The defining characteristic is that they are concerned consumers who have studied the system that produces the food that they eat and made some very conscious choices about what system they want to support with their purchasing dollar. And I was very pleased at the progress we made here. That our return on investment here, despite my bragging about our growth, the growth has been good. Return on investment here is not good. I mean, it's very low. An Ivy League MBA would say, why would you operate a business with that lower return? But it's what we want to do, and it's very pleasing. And I'm satisfied with it. What I'm not satisfied with is I don't see this business replicating the way that I think it should. You know, the linear industrial farm model is highly scalable. You know, it's just incredible how the size of, you people probably already know the size of the big multinational food companies, just incredible market concentration. They're huge because they operate it in a very linear manner. It lends itself to efficiency, it lends itself to scale, to growth, bigger and bigger. And what we do is not that way. It lends itself to being replicatable. It's not scalable, highly replicatable. There could and should be a white oak pastures type model in every agricultural county in the country, or 2 or 3 or 4. And I had hoped we were heading that way, but I have gotten really frustrated with the lack of scale of replication I've seen in this. And to that end, I've just created a nonprofit 501c3 called CFAR. That's an acronym, Center for Agricultural Resilience. And it's just brand new. We've only had one session. We'll have our next session in October. But I'm really excited about that, the contribution I believe that nonprofit can make to this cause. As I'm sure you probably know, regenerative land management has become a real buzzword. There's a lot of books being written about it, a lot of articles, a lot of webinars, and I'm delighted by that. To be sure, regenerative land management is the first step towards creating a better food production model for this company. My fear is that people who are embracing that have not realized that that's not enough. You can't, a farmer or a rancher cannot just change the way they farm or ranch and it'll all be okay. It's not that simple. I told you it's very complex. When a farmer or rancher moves from the industrial centralized model to this sort of model, they internalize a lot of the cost that's been absorbed by big ag. I rail against big ag with justification. But big ag does provide certain services to farmers that have got to be accomplished. And when you step away from, when a farmer steps away from big ag, they have internalized those costs. You know, my statement is that consumers don't eat cows and hogs and sheep. They eat beef and pork and lamb. And that transition has got to be accomplished. You don't have to build your own like we did, but it's got to be dealt with. The rest of that story is consumers don't consume where farmers farm. We farm in Georgia and Missouri and Arkansas and Alabama. Consumers consume to such a great extent in those high disposable income zip codes. So being able to monetize the production is a difficult part. And there's a lot of training going on for regenerative land management. I did not feel compelled to jump into the fray to teach people how to farm regeneratively. That's, people are doing that. But I did feel compelled to try to give people the opportunity to learn what we've learned over the last 25 years about resilience. So I'm going to let that rest for a while and see if there's any questions. I see Dr. Peggy Bartlett there. Hello, Dr. Bartlett. How are you doing? I was just talking about you. But areas, are there any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. So if you have any questions or if you would like to say any comments, please feel free to raise your hands. The raise your hand button is on the reactions button at the bottom. If you click on that, you see raise hand icon there. So if you raise your hand, I can call on you. And there you go, Peggy. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that people listening know how incredibly generous Will Harris has been to Emory over the years, coming year after year after year to help us work on our sustainable food program and show up and generously give away delicious tastes at our food fair. I have many, many questions, but I'll try to keep myself to two at the moment. One question is, can you tell us, Will, anything about the study that I believe was done at White Oak Pastures by folks, I believe at Michigan State, about climate impacts? And the other, so that study, what's the latest on that? And then I really am curious, there was a lot of damage, I believe, on your farm several years ago with a hurricane. How are things doing now as a result of that damage?
Yeah. Thank you for that, Dr. Bob. So I am very proud of the study that was done. It was actually paid for by General Mills. The genesis of that is I had met the founders of Epic Bars, little meat bars that they sell. And they were just a young entrepreneurial couple, and they were buying beef and pork and lamb and poultry from us. And they called one day to say they had sold their business to General Mills. And I was very happy for them. But my assumption is that I wouldn't do business with them anymore because we have not performed well with big multinational food companies. And but surprisingly, General Mills kept doing business with us. It's not a lot, but they're good customers. And I got a visit by the vice president of sustainability one day or one couple of days. And he was very concerned about the regenerative marketing that the Epic people had been using, they were continuing to use under the ownership of General Mills. So General Mills is more litigation shy and careful about what they claim. So he offered to pay for a program called an LCA, that stands for Life Cycle Assessment. And he agreed to pay an environmental engineering firm called Pastures, an international firm. And the deal was he would pay for it. I think it was $80,000 or something. And we would cooperate and provide the records and do what they need to do here in terms of the ecological measurements. They came in, and what they found is that we actually sequester 3.5 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent for every pound of grass-fed beef that we produce. We are carbon negative, we are carbon sink. Very proud of that. Kind of interesting, Impossible Foods, Impossible Burger happened to hire the same environmental firm to do an LCA for them, and they found that they are 3.5 pounds. They produce 3.5 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent for every pound of Impossible Burger. So that was interesting to me for obvious reasons, but we are very proud of it. Now, I will say that it has been challenged. Anybody who's looked at our farm agrees that we are carbon negative. But the way carbon's sequestration is calculated is still very much for debate. So some people say it's less than 3.5, and I have no opinion on that. I know how to sequester carbon. I don't know how to measure carbon. But the other question is, and I'm happy to comment on that further if anyone wants to know about it. Thank you for asking about the hurricane. That was Hurricane Michael almost 3 years ago. I'm 80 miles from the Gulf of Mexico and 300 feet up. So hurricanes are a way of life for us and always have been. And they're really something we look forward to, because by the time they get here, 80 miles in, 300 feet up, they're not a wind event, they're a rain event. It's a tropical storm or tropical depression has been degraded. But Hurricane Michael did not read that book, and it came through here as a Cat 4, and we were ground zero, and it really was devastating. Well, we're back.
Great, thank you so much. I see hands up by Gregory Burns, and I'm getting some questions on the chat as well. First, Gregory, please.
Oh, great, thanks a lot. I'm a professor here at Emory. I guess I call that my day job, but largely because of COVID, I bought the farm about 6 months ago. So literally, I moved to Spalding County and bought a small farm, about 80 acres. And I'm just getting started with cattle. And one of the things you said is very interesting to me. You had said that what you do is replicable, but not scalable. And so I'm very interested in that because I'm at the other end of the spectrum right now, very small scale. Is there a minimum that you think that you need to begin doing what you're doing?
That is, no, I cannot come up with a minimum. That is so highly situational. First of all, 80 acres, it's incredible what you can do with 80 acres of land. I mean, it's just incredible. If you get the cycles of nature operating properly, I'm going to say it again, the water cycle, the mineral cycle, the carbon cycle, the microbial cycle, all those cycles working the way they're supposed to, the abundance that it yields is incredible. Now, it requires some choices on your part. And I'm not saying you did not make a good choice. I might not have recommended cattle on 80 acres. You can raise cattle on 80 acres. cattle require, I mean, you couldn't have picked a bigger ruminant to start, a bigger animal to start with in our production model. And so it requires some infrastructure. And I might have suggested sheep or goats. You need animal impact. You need those animals in there fighting off that plant material, cooking it in that vat, and then putting that manure back in the microbes to eat. I might have suggested sheep or goats, but cattle can work.
It was honestly, it was dictated by the fencing that was already here.
Right. Fair enough. And of course, what species you raise is not nearly as crucial as how you raise them. And everything we do here, and what I would recommend you do there, is biomimicry, the emulation of nature. Thinking through how this system would have looked before we Europeans with technology messed it all up. And it requires constant movement of the animals. Animals are never confined to one place in nature. Those animals need to be moved every day. I don't know how much fencing you've got, but I bet it's not nearly enough, because you need to be able, if you only have one cow, he or she needs to move every day. Mm-hmm. And it's the emulation of herds of buffalo being moved across the Great Plains by wolves. You're the wolf. Or elands and gazelles being moved across the Serengeti by lions, or caribou across the tundra by polar bears. From an animal welfare perspective, those animals need to express instinctive behavior, and that constant movement is part of that. And from a good for the land perspective, that those plants need to be bit off very close every day. I'm not very close, within a long recovery. And if they're just loose out there, they don't do that. So I would invite you to come visit. I'd love to show you what we do.
I would love to. Thanks. Great.
I think all of us are wanting to come visit at some point, Mr. Harris. But there is a question from Kande. She asks, how long did it take to revert the damage caused by traditional farming after regenerative farming practices were applied? And which are the systems that bounce back more rapidly?
I'm sorry, how long did it take to?
How long did it take to revert the damage that was caused by traditional farming by changing to the regenerative agriculture practices?
So you can take a degraded industrially farmed piece of land and not use any chemical fertilizer or pesticide on it for 3 years, and USDA will certify it as organic. USDA certified organic. Let me assure you that land is not healed in 3 years. It is not. I don't argue with 3 years. It's got to be a starting point, and 3 years is fine. But if you look at on our website, whiteoakpastures.com, under the environmental side, land stewardship, I think we call it side, you'll see that LCA, that life cycle assessment. It will show you a graph of year 0 to year 20. And over that period of time, the organic matter went from 0.5% to 5%. And that's still going up. So how long did it take? We're not there yet. Our land is still improving. So, but it happens slowly, gradually every year. When I was at the University of Georgia in the 70s, I took every soils course that was available to undergrads, and there were only 3. And we were told that you can't build organic matter in the coastal plain soil. I wrote it down. The guy said it and I wrote it down. And he was wrong. The fact is, you can't build organic matter in the coastal plain soil if you use chemical fertilizer and pesticide and tillage. And that was the context he was coming from. but you can certainly build organic matter in the coastal plain soil. Look at my life cycle assessment and you will see. Even, but the time wise, even I take over these degraded farms and we work our program on them. 5 years later, I can still see residual herbicides in the field. The half-life on these pesticides is incredible. I don't know how long it is, but it, you know, you can't start any sooner than right now. And when you start, it will get better.
Yeah, that's great. So we're getting a lot of questions. I think we will go first to Taylor and then Eugenia. I'm sure. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. And Jack and Brooke. So Taylor, you want to go first?
Yes, thank you so much for this presentation. It's been really, really interesting. I just had two quick questions, and I'm wondering kind of back, I think you said in the 90s, what was it that made you realize that you needed to shift your agricultural practices, like initially? And then once you made that decision that you needed to shift, how did you determine what your more sustainable action plan would look like?
So as I mentioned when I was speaking earlier, I noticed the adverse effects on my land and animals earlier than most people. You know, so many people still won't acknowledge it. And 25 years ago, we were acknowledging it. It's not to my credit that I was so sensitive. That's not the way that worked. I was the very linear alpha Western person that if it said put a pint to the acre, I probably put a quart to the acre. And if it said give the animal 2 cc's per hundredweight, I probably gave them 4 cc's per hundredweight. So that caused me to see the negative unintended consequences of using those technologies. And it was not pleasing to me. So I started, there was no question what was causing it. I mean, it was you could step in the edge of the woods and the soil was a mineral, I mean, a organic medium that was teeming with life. You step over my field and the soil was a dead mineral medium and it was 30 feet apart and you could visually see it. So and there was no question what was causing it, it was what I was doing. So I stopped doing it. And as time went on, I came to learn what I could do to accelerate the healing process, which is primarily animal agriculture. I want to say this, I fully respect the vegetarian or vegan decision. That's a lifestyle choice that everybody gets to make. And I would go to war to defend those people's right to make that choice. But as the 66-year-old guy who has rehabilitated thousands of acres of land, I can tell you there's no way to cost effectively rehabilitate degraded land without using animal impact. It's the way the earth evolved. And you know, this is simply got to be part of it. I wouldn't ask anybody to eat those meats. If you find it unappealing to eat meat for whatever reason, that's fine. But you cannot ask farmers to economically perform in remediating degraded land without using animal impact. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think listening from a farmer about the needs and what is important on the land, I think that is really important. Eugenia, sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, that's what I was majorly concerned with. How did the actual land mass deal with the hurricane? That was my main thing. I wanted to know how did they get around that? How did what did he do to implement to make it work better for after the hurricane had taken place?
Well, thank goodness I've only had to get through one hurricane, so I've not learned to be good at it, and I hope I don't learn to be good at it. I told you that this 3,200 acres of land is divided up into 100 and something paddocks, and what I didn't tell you is that we have about 170 miles of fencing on this place, perimeter fencing and cross fencing, so that we can constantly move the animals. And we had horrible, and we plant a lot of trees. We love trees. So trees and hurricanes and fences are not a good combination. So we had a lot of damage. Our insurance provider calculated $1.3 million in damages here on this farm. We did have insurance because it's never enough to make you fully whole again. We were fortunate that we had financial capacity to borrow money. We had equity, that we could borrow against, and we just rebuilt. And it was economically a huge economic setback for us, but luckily we were able to survive it. The economic part is part that we all go to. We had no loss of human life, which is great. We do have some animal loss. Probably the thing I hate worse on a personal basis is these woods won't ever look the same in my lifetime. And it's not an economic loss. I wasn't going to cut the trees, but it's a huge loss.
Yeah, sad.
Thank you for sharing that. Jack, do you want to ask the question yourself, or if you're unable?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Hi, you talked a little bit earlier about keeping your sort of agricultural practices as close to natural processes as possible. And I'm not sure what the historical fire regimes have been on your land, but do you utilize any prescribed burns on your land management practice?
I do not. I see the benefit of prescribed burn in many contexts. Mine is not one of them. I do have a great animal. We do have a lot of forest. We control the vegetation in the forest by grazing. But those 100 and something 30-acre paddocks, we strive to try to have some woods and some meadow in all those paddocks. So we, as we move the animals through, the trampling effect keeps down excess vegetation, so there's just really not much to burn. But I do think that burning is a very reasonable process. I think we've all read that Native Americans utilized fire, and fire is as old as lightning. I mean, it's a very natural process.
Yeah, great. Brooke, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for your talk. That was really, really interesting. And I'm super interested in soil practices, healthy soil practices, and farming resilience. And so I was curious kind of a two-part question, what you think the biggest barriers are for other farmers to transition to resilient practices and healthy soil practices. And then if you think that there's anything that local or state governments can do to help incentivize farmers to transition to those practices.
You've hit on a couple of key areas that need discussion there. So first of all, I've got to say that none of my friends and neighbors and relatives, this is a purely agrarian economy here. We're right in the middle of the corn, cotton, peanut, intensely farmed area of the state. And zero of my friends, neighbors, and relatives here have embraced this sort of farming. And it's very reasonable that they have not done that. They're part of a financially successful model that has withstood the 80 years of, it's been 80 years in the making. 3 generations of their families have farmed this way. They're very heavily invested in their farming program economically and philosophically. And, what I'm doing is unproven. I mean, I cannot tell you right now whether what I'm doing is a niche or a trend. If you felt strongly it was either one, I would not argue with you. I don't know. And what they do is survive for 80 years. There are people around the country that have embraced it. And I'm certainly not the only one, but I'm the only one around here. And that speaks to the sparsity of us. There's just not that many in the country. And again, understandably so, it's high risk, it's high capital entry to make those changes, and it's unproven. So you cannot be critical of a farmer who's still involved in industrial practices. There are a lot of naysayers that, one of the things that really I'm tired of hearing it is people say, well, you can't feed the world based on the way you farm. Well, I don't know that we can feed the world going forward the way we're farming now. I mean, looks like me, it's not working so good. What I'm doing basically has been around since, probably the last dinosaur went out. What they're doing has been going on for 80 years, since World War II, and it looks like it's breaking. I agree that no farm, no food production system will feed a population that is growing in perpetuity infinitely. I mean, there's a carrying capacity of this planet, and we may be past it. I mean, I don't know what that is. I'm not smart enough to know. We may have milked it beyond what we should have. And I think that if acres of land it's what we run out of, the industrial model is a better model than mine, because you can produce more food bringing in inputs on an acre of land. It's got a lot of damage to it, but produces a lot of calories. If the limiting factor is petroleum, my system's better because I don't need as much. If it's water, my system's better. I don't need as much. If it's reductive phosphate and potassium to dig out of the ground for fertilizer, my system's better because I don't need it. If it's antibiotics that the pathogens are resistant to, my system's better. I can take you through probably 25 or 30 short stays in the barrel that my system's better. And the rest of that story is, take my word for it, you can't feed the world the way you farm, so don't even try. And I resist that. I mean, I would like to see, I hate to say government. You asked about government, I'll tell you about that in a minute. But I wish someone would start or make it available to start a lot of white oak pastures and let them evolve and just see how many people we can feed. I think it's surprising. I think it'd be a lot. You mentioned government. I have no confidence in government to help with what I do. I mean, there's just too many lobbyists with too many dollars representing big food, big pharma, big petroleum, big commodities, big, and so that I think that, I put big food in the, I believe it's where big tobacco was in the 60s. And the big tobacco knew they were killing people, but they kept it a secret and advertised their way out from under it until the government stopped them. And I think that's exactly where we are with big food now, except I don't have the confidence that our government will have the courage to stop anybody from doing anything. So I think you own your own, baby.
Great discussion. Thank you so much. Next is Alex. Alex, are you able to ask the question yourself?
Yes. So I think you already touched on this a bit in your answers to the other questions, but I was wondering if you personally faced any pushback or stigma or just any kind of resistance from people in your community, other farmers, family members, when you switched to this regenerative form of agriculture, since it had been so entrenched in your family and your culture for so many years in the past?
Well, was that question, where did we get help from? Was that what that question was?
I'm just wondering what was the reaction from your family or other farmers in your community when you changed your agricultural practices, given that the old, I guess, big ag industrial practices had been so entrenched in that culture?
So I don't think my friends and neighbors and relatives who farm industrially care much what I do. I mean, I'm not out evangelizing, villainizing what they do. I see the damage and I say it out loud, but I respect those people's right to farm the way they want to farm. So I don't think, I've never gotten a lot of pushback. And of course, I live here. I mean, I'm one of the good old boys. So it's a little harder to push back on me than it would if I was a 21-year-old from Vermont who moved in and started doing things differently. Big ag despises what I do. My system, so yeah, big ag, big food distribution, all started post-World War II. And they all co-evolved together. And no two can make it without the other one. And we sell to some very good customers who are wholesale grocery companies that have been buying from me for 25 years, and I appreciate their business. But they struggle to bring me in and keep me there because I don't fit. We're bigger than most farmers that farm this way. But those wholesale grocery buyers are accustomed to picking up the phone and saying, send me 50,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets to the following 8 warehouses. And I'll never see 50,000 pounds of 6-ounce fillets. We just don't fit. Cynical people say that they're big grocery is trying to keep us out. They're not trying to keep us out. It's just we don't fit well. They got a system that works, and local sourcing of food is very difficult for them. They've tried and they work with us. We continue to work with them, but it's a tough fit. Big ag does loathe us because we represent a system that's unpleasing to them. I'm gonna get on a sensitive area here, and I'll probably tick somebody off, and I hope you get over it. The most vehement criticism we have are from what I call the militant vegan movement. I told you earlier that I respect any individual's decision to not eat meat, not wear leather. That's a personal decision. I fully appreciate that. There's another, what I call militant vegans are people who don't choose, they choose not to eat meat, wear leather. I respect it, but they don't want anybody else to do it either, for whatever reasons, and that's not okay. I can't make your lifestyle choice. Please don't make mine. But those militant vegans, and I think that there's some financial assistance from the vegetable protein complex. They have put many points on the board villainizing cattle over the last 10 years. There's nobody on this call that hadn't heard repeatedly for the last 10 years, cattle are destroying our environment. And this old man that's done a lot of it has just got through telling you, I can't fix a degraded environment without using animal agriculture. So they put a lot of points on the board successfully because they told you the truth. The way people raise beef industrially today is destroying the environment. So they get traction with what they say. But then more recently, there's been the recognition by many that regenerative, resilient animal production actually is a solution to climate change. We're part of the solution. We're not part of the problem. And those people are, I mean, they call me out by name as a liar and a charlatan. I wish they'd come to Bluffton so we could talk about it. But there was an article in the Ecologist, I believe is the name of that magazine, from England. Some guy just called me out by name and said terrible things about me and my program. He's never talked to me. He's never been there. So that there's a lot of sensitivity on the part of the people who just really hate animal agriculture.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Marlon, do you want to ask your question yourself? If not, I will ask on your behalf. So Marlon asks, what was the most...
Sorry, Ari, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay, sounds good.
Marlon, I thought I made you mad. You weren't going to ask me.
Oh, no, not at all. I appreciate you for speaking with us today. What I was going to ask was after making your transition back to the traditional methods of farming, I was wondering, and you sort of answered it in the previous questions, but I was wondering, like, what was what's like the most challenging thing you faced making that transition? Did you have any regrets at all after doing that?
No, not today. The most challenging part of it is cash flow. I was blessed. I inherited a very nice farm and some other assets from my dad, granddad, great granddad, and we were profitable in the industrial model. So we were living quite comfortably. We were not rich people, but we lived very, very comfortably. I leveraged that. I never borrowed a penny in my life until the early 2000s. I borrowed $7.2 million in a very short period of time. I never financed a pickup truck, but I borrowed that money, built the processing plants and the other infrastructure that we needed. And of course, almost no business is that high capital cash flows starting day one. So there were some really anxious times. I must say, I never got in trouble financially. I never had a bill that I didn't pay on time, a debt service at a bank I didn't make on time. There were a lot of times I didn't know how I was going to do it, and that was a very stressful way to live my life for about a decade and a half. But today I'm very glad I did it. I have these daughters who have come back, who would not have come back to do what I used to do. And I know my daughters well enough to know that would not have been pleasing to them. But 2 of the 3 have come back and brought their spouses with them. And that alone makes it worth it.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Carla, for waiting for a very long time. Did you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you very much for sharing your wisdom and your experience. I guess my question is about how did you learn what you know? And in particular, I'm interested in knowing what interactions you've had with the Cooperative Extension Service, if they have been helpful, and if not, why or how? And also what kinds of sources of knowledge have you tapped into through your journey?
So I'm very pleased that there's a lot of resources out there today instructing people on how to manage land regeneratively. Sadly, there are a few out there that are not very good, but there are many out there that are great. There's a guy named Gabe Brown from Bismarck, North Dakota, that wrote a book called Dirt to Soil that is fantastic. There are others out there that write and on the speaker circuit, and I just have wonderful information to share. Sadly, when I started, there was nobody was talking about it, and we were figuring it out as we went. We knew what we were doing that we were not pleased with. We tried different things. Some worked, some didn't. The ones that didn't work, we tried something else. Some worked, some didn't. We tried something else. Some worked. It just it was a University of Georgia College of Agriculture C student experimenting with his own money, and we figured it out before we went broke. And I'm very comfortable with what we do today, although we're still reinventing ourselves and doing things quite different. So but today there's a lot of really, we have an internship program today. We bring in 6 interns 4 times a year. So it's 24 a year we're training. It's a formal program. We get about 20 applications for the 6 slots typically. So you can go somewhere and learn how to do it without gambling a lot of your own money. And that's a blessing. I'm glad that's available today. I wish it'd been around 25 years ago when I was starting. Your next question was about extension. And I'm going to answer that question very honestly, but I'm going to do it without being critical, because there's no reason to be critical. I graduated from the University of Georgia, and the corporate extension is part of the University of Georgia. And my county agent in this county is a dear friend of mine who's a brilliant young man that I think the world of. But he doesn't know how I farm, and he shouldn't know how I farm. He is in a county in which his clientele that contributes to his salary significantly raise corn and industrially raise corn and cotton and peanuts. That's his constituency. And for him to have a big investment in learning about what I do is not something he could be asked to be part of. I just had the fairly new dean of the University of Georgia College of Agriculture visit here last week. That was quite a surprise and quite pleasant. So I hope that, I'm not super optimistic, but I hope things are headed in the right direction. You also got to remember that dean is a great guy. He chose to come here. Nobody made him come here. He chose to do it. But, he gets a tremendous amount of his funding from the Monsantos of the world. So, things are driven by money, and you have to pick your partners and understand. And when people can't support you, you got to put yourself in their shoes and understand why they can't support you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that story. I feel like hopefully the time is changing, and that there's going to be so many farmers that are wanting to follow your path. I think it's just fascinating that you're not just feeding people, but you are really supporting the economy, and you're hiring so many people. This is so important for the local economy. We really need to, I think, find a way that more people know about your work and how they can support, and how they can, I guess, copy what you're doing in a way that's going to be good for all of us. There has been so many comments thanking you for all that you have shared. We are just so grateful, and I cannot read all of the thank you comments, but everybody just so grateful for sharing your stories and experiences in the way that you did. I think we have never had this very engaging session like this. So we are very grateful. And if there's anybody else that has any more last questions, we are already over time a little bit. So sorry, we've been taking up so much of your time, Mr. Harris, but this has been so enlightening and cannot thank you enough. So I'm going to be sending you a round of applause from everybody. I hope you join me virtually for that. But thank you so much for this great session. And thank you everybody for participating as well. We hope you will join us back. Thank you very much for having me today. And I invite y'all to come visit us. We've actually built a store or a restaurant and cabins for lodging. I want to end with this. So we did not intend to be in the customer-facing business with a store and cabins and lodging, but when big food focused on this niche that we're in and started greenwashing their product, spending so much money greenwashing their product to make it appear what people like us do, that devalues our product, devalues our effort. We found out that the only sword and shield we have against greenwashing is authenticity and transparency. So we now actively invite people to come to the farm because we are very proud of our program, and we will promise full transparency. You can see anything you want to see, we're sure to. I think that is so important, and I hope that we can visit you sometime, and I hope that all of you have a chance to visit. And I also want to say thanks again for supporting our, Emory's sustainable, sorry, what is the word I'm looking for? Sustainable, can you not help me out here?
Sustainable food program.
Yes. Sustainable food efforts. And I guess the sustainable food fair and everything. So thank you so much for that as well. Okay, everybody, stay safe and healthy. And thank you again. Thank you so much, Mr. Harris. Thank y'all. Enjoyed it.